Today is part 2 of the 5-part series on how to build a clothing business. I know that building a clothing business can seem so overwhelming, so today we're going over all the things to set up your business properly. A few of the items we're going to cover today is setting up a business bank account, your credit card, how to know what to write off for your business, and how to track all of your expenses. I'm also going to be going through getting your domain, setting up a website, and creating a logo. And there'll be a lot of other information sprinkled in also. Let's dive into this. I want to put a disclaimer on this from the start that I am not an accountant, a lawyer. You should never take any advice from me when it comes to any of this kind of stuff. I'm simply sharing what I did in my business to set it up. I'm sharing some of the things that I did wrong in my first businesses and also what I feel like I'm doing right setting up this last business that I started. You should always consult your own accountant and lawyer on how to set up your own business. Obviously, state to state, things are going to be a little bit different, and you should always make sure that you consult the right people before setting any of this up. So the first step in setting up your business is coming up with a name. Now, this should not take you a ton of time, but I'm going to tell you the process I go through when I have a little bit of a block on coming up with a name for a business. So if you have absolutely no idea what you want to name your business, the thing that I like to do is just get out a piece of paper or pull up the notes section on your phone and start writing down any words that you like. This can be anything. This is just a brain dump. So you're just going to start writing down words as they come to you. They don't have to go together. They don't have to sound like anything. It can just be words that you like. And these words may or may not relate to the product that you're selling. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something to do with clothing. Think of Pink Lily, for example. That's a very big clothing brand. It has nothing to do with clothing. So anything like that you can come up with of names that you like, jot those names down. And this can take you a few days. Don't feel rushed on this particular part because depending on if you're feeling creative, if you're feeling stressed and blocked, things are going to come to you easier or harder depending on the day. So once you have a really good list, I start trying to put these words together, or I figure out the words that I really like and start trying to combine another word with them. I'm a really big fan of 2-word names, and that definitely does not have to be something that you go with, but that is something that I really like to do. It just has worked really well for me and my businesses, so that's an option. Once I have an idea for a name that I like, I start Googling, researching, seeing if the name is taken, seeing if social media platforms are available. This can really, in my book, help determine if I want to use this name or not. I remember for one of my businesses, I was trying to come up with a name and I Googled that name that I wanted, and it actually was like a cannabis company or something. So I obviously didn't want people searching for my clothing business and that coming up instead. So I made a pivot there and went with a different name. So something like that, if that's a big deal to you, can really make or break what kind of name you want. Now, if you come up with a name and you really like it and everything's great, you can get social media, you can get, things like that, but the domain is taken, I may have a workaround for you later in the video. So don't get discouraged quite yet if the domain is gone. Okay, next you're going to need to get a sales tax permit and a reseller permit. And again, this might not be quite the order. You may want to get the name of your business, decide if you're going to set up a corporation or if you're just going to stay a sole proprietor. These are questions for your accountant, and you can talk to a lawyer about this. You can also Google and find out a bunch of different information. I know when I was first starting out, I listened to a really great podcast, and it was from Scott Volker. He was an Amazon seller at the time, and he had a whole podcast with a lawyer, I believe, or an accountant. I can't remember which one, but they went through setting up as a sole proprietor, setting up as an S Corp, setting up as a C Corp. They went through everything, and it was so helpful to me. And I actually went back and tried to find that podcast so that I could link it below, but he's actually rebranded since then, and I couldn't find the podcast anywhere. But all of this information is on the internet. You can look all of it up, read about it, and then consult your accountant or lawyer. So if you think that you want to incorporate, wait to get your sales tax permit and reseller permit until you have made that decision, because it will change the name if you have to put incorporated after your name or whatever. So once you've got that figured out, get your sales tax and reseller permit. I've linked a couple of really great articles in the description below about sales tax permits and reseller permits, explaining information about them. But again, Google, understand it for yourself. I know this information, for me at least, can get a little bit muddy. I just don't like this part of the business, but unfortunately, it's definitely a part of doing business. I want to backtrack just for a second on the topic of corporation. And when I set up my first business, my clothing business, I had no idea that that business was going to take off as quickly as it did. And I know that really when you're starting a business, you have no way of knowing this. And in hindsight, I wish that I had set that business up properly from the beginning, had separate bank accounts, had separate credit cards, which I'm going to go into all of that. Set it up properly as a corporation from the beginning, because it was a bit of a mess to go backwards and try and fix all of that. Not that it can't be done, it can be, but if you set it up properly from the beginning, you're going to have a lot smoother sailing. So just definitely take the time and research that stuff and talk to who you need to talk to in order to get things set up as best as you can from the start. Okay, so another great idea on that note is to just set up a separate bank account. As soon as you have your name, when you know you're going to be incorporated or not incorporated, you want to set up a separate bank account for this business, and you want to run everything through that bank account. Again, not a lawyer, not an accountant. I'm sharing what I did and what I wish I would have done from the beginning. And I wish in my first business I had set it up with a separate bank account, separate credit card. These are just things that I wish I would have done in the beginning and that I did with my current business. It's going to make everything really clean and nice when tax season comes along. You're going to have one place to look for things, and that's it. I use a separate business credit card for every purchase in my business. Everything that I'm writing off that has to do with my business is on that credit card. You want to make sure that you look for a credit card that gives you a really good return on points per dollar spent, because those points can make a really big difference in your life. I absolutely love to travel, and since starting my business in 2013, I have never paid for a hotel, a rental car, a flight. Points have paid for all of that, and it's a huge benefit when you don't have to pay for any of that stuff for anyone that you're traveling with. That's a huge added bonus in owning your own business. You'll start to accumulate a massive amount of points that can be used on anything. If you don't like to travel, you can use them to buy clothes, you can use them to eat out at restaurants. There's so many options now for points. Just when you're searching for a credit card, make sure that the points can be transferred to something that fits your lifestyle. When I started my first business, I mentioned that I didn't set that up properly. And what happened was I started my first business. We ended up incorporating a while later, so we had to go back and fix all of that. And then I started a home decor business, and you would have thought that I would have learned the first time, but I commingled the home decor business with the clothing business. Now, this wasn't really an issue when it came to tax time, because everything was operated out of the same warehouse, the expenses were all the same, everything like that. But when we went to sell our home decor business, everything was commingled, and we were forced to shut down our clothing business at the same time because of how we set this up and how we commingled everything. So I just cannot stress the importance of just keeping each business separate. If you end up starting more than one business, just keep them separate. It will be so much easier in the long run. And if you ever want to sell one of your businesses, it's nice and clean, and you can hopefully keep the other business or businesses that you have completely separate and continue those on. I know when you're starting out, that's not your first thought, selling a business, and I never in a million years thought that I would sell a business. It just wasn't even on my radar. So it's something that I've learned, and it's something that I want you to learn from the get-go and not be in a mess like I was. When it comes to keeping track of expenses, keep every single receipt. Again, I have to keep saying this, I am not an accountant. I'm sharing what I do in my business and what has worked for me. And I hold on to every single receipt. I enter every single receipt into a spreadsheet. When I first started this current business, I decided to try QuickBooks, and it just wasn't for me. It actually felt like more work than just entering it into a spreadsheet. So for me, I didn't love it, and it was obviously an added expense, one that I didn't feel like I needed. I use a very simple spreadsheet that keeps track of every expense, and when tax season comes along, I hand that over to my accountant, and everything is clean and written out for him, and it's super simple. So don't get all wrapped up in using all these special tools. I also had an app that I was starting to take pictures of every receipt, and I tried a variety of different ways, and for me, it just came down to a simple spreadsheet. So what I do is I have a box that I put every receipt in, and every month I sit down and I go through those receipts and I track them on the spreadsheet. I used to wait in our first and second businesses, we used to wait until tax season and we went through everything. And you want to talk about a nightmare? It was a complete and total nightmare because I wasn't great about printing out receipts. I wasn't great about keeping track of stuff. So we were always having to go back and try and dig through stuff and find stuff. It was a disaster. So now, as soon as I purchase something, I print out the receipt, or I keep the receipt if I'm in a store. I bring it home, put it in the box, and once a month I have a day that I sit down. It usually only takes me 2 to 3 hours during the slower season, maybe a little bit longer in my busy season, more expenses. But I sit down and I put those into the spreadsheet. I file away all of the receipts and it's done. And when tax season comes along, it's so easy. My spreadsheet is done. I don't have to go back searching for stuff. When everyone's complaining about tax season, I'm already done. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit lighter. Let's talk about domains. So there's a ton of platforms that sell domains, and I have always gotten mine from GoDaddy. Now, this isn't necessarily the only place that you can get your domains. This is just where I started getting mine. I've always had good luck with them. If I've ever had any issues, they've always been very helpful. So I've just stuck with GoDaddy. I did recently come across a new site for domains, and I did end up grabbing some domains from that website. So I had a couple of names that I wanted to grab domains on for possible future businesses, and they were already taken, and it looked like people that had taken them aren't using them. They're just sitting there and they want to sell those domains for a big price tag. So I don't want to buy a domain for a big price tag. So I ended up trying this new platform. I have no association. I actually know nothing about it. So I've heard a couple of people on YouTube talk about this domain service, and I decided just to grab some domains. So I've linked this below, and mainly the difference that I can see is that instead of your web address ending in .com, your web address ends in .store, which I actually think is a pretty genius domain because you're obviously selling something, and I don't think there's anything wrong with not having a .com address. I never really liked the .org or .net, but .store sounds pretty good to me. So if you're struggling with domains, definitely at least check this site out, do some research. Again, I don't know anything about it. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but it's another option for grabbing domains, and that's linked below in the description. On that note, while you're grabbing a domain, make sure you double check social media platforms before you pay for that domain. So I usually check Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Those are kind of my main 3 that I like to grab that match my domain. Now you can always I'll use the Pink Lily example again. Say you want to use Pink Lily, which I wouldn't recommend, and Pink Lily's already taken. You can say like shop Pink Lily boutique, Pink Lily store. There's a variety of ways to change that on social media just slightly so that you can grab that handle. All right, when it comes to setting up your website, there's really only one website I can recommend because it's the only one I've used, and I think it's the most commonly used website, and that's Shopify. So I would highly recommend setting your storefront up there. They have a lot of options for pre-made free templates. If you don't like their basic template, they also have some paid templates you can buy. I will say one caveat to this is that if you're going to install a template on Shopify to use, do not go to Etsy and buy one. I made this mistake in every single one of my businesses, and it's not until my current business that I found out why you should not use an Etsy template. And that is because I tried to make some major changes to my Shopify store, and I ended up having to hire a developer to change things for me because Etsy templates are slightly different in that they don't allow the same changes always that the Shopify templates allow. So you might have a little more trouble with coding and certain things with an Etsy template. So I just would really recommend, if you can, stay away from an Etsy template and just stick with a Shopify template. And that's the other note, is that you can always hire a Shopify developer. There's certified Shopify developers that if you want a small change to your site, you can go through and email a few of them and tell them what you want done. You can ask for a quote. There's so many options within Shopify. There's also plugins that you can add, apps that you can add to your Shopify store for upsells and all of that kind of stuff. Just be aware that each of these apps that you put on your store is normally going to cost some money. So it can add quite a bit of money to what your store costs monthly or yearly. So just make sure that you're paying attention to that. There's so many good Shopify tutorials on YouTube that I'm not even going to bother doing a Shopify tutorial. Just search it on YouTube and you will find a wide variety of Shopify tutorials for setting up your store. I'm going to go into third-party platforms in another video, but I just want to touch on the fact that I know you've probably heard me say this before, but Shopify, or whatever store you choose to host your website on, should be your number one focus. Don't ever get dependent on a third-party platform. Always put the majority of your time and effort into your own store and your own customers. And again, I'll get into this more in future videos, but I just want to reiterate that. All right, let's move on to logos. The first thing I want to say is learn from my mistake and just create your logo yourself. I have hired multiple people to create logos for me and they just have never been right. I've always ended up going back and creating my own logo. Now, I've had people who have drawn maybe a picture of some sort to add to my logo that I already have. But when it comes to creating your entire logo, just save yourself some money and just create it yourself. And the platform I like to use for this is Canva. And Canva is a platform that you can use for so many things in your business. I use it for all of my banners on my website. I use it for creating pictures for social media. I use Canva so much in my business. And I do have the pro plan on Canva. You can just do the regular plan that doesn't cost anything, but the pro plan has just completely been worth it to me. So I do use that plan, and go in there and just create your own logo. A really great thing to do that I've always done is I go on Pinterest or Etsy and I look for ideas, kind of look for styles that I like, and then I go in and kind of create something on my own based on a certain style that I like. If you feel like you really need to hire a logo done, you can always go to Fiverr or Etsy. Again, I've done this. They've been fine. I've just always ended up changing it and doing my own logo in the long run. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about what else I'm doing in my business versus hiring it out. So even though I've had two businesses that have done extremely well and I could put money into this business from those businesses, I like to bootstrap my businesses. I've always done this and I will probably always do this. Start out small and keep putting the money back into the business and keep growing it. So I'm doing a lot of things myself in the current business that I'm growing. I do have a part-time employee right now and I'm hoping to get 1 to 2 more part-time employees or a full-time employee. That is a mistake that I made in my first business that I will not make in this one. I will not kill myself doing packaging and short myself on doing the things that I need to be doing when someone else can be doing the packaging. So hiring an employee is one thing that I really believe in. As soon as you can, hire a part-time employee, family member, something like that. But right now in my business, I'm doing the payroll, the quarterly reports, the sales tax, all of that type of stuff behind the scenes. I'm doing all that business stuff in this business. I highly recommend when you're starting out to at least learn this stuff, because unless you're hiring an accountant right off the bat, which you absolutely could do, I want to know how everything within my business runs. And then once I know how it runs, I will pass it off. Because if that employee ever quits or something happens and you need to figure out quickly how to do it, I just think it's a really good idea to know how everything operates in your business and know how to do everything in your business and then pass those tasks off to someone. Now, this doesn't mean that you should continue to use your time every year doing things that you don't have to do. If there's things year to year as your business grows that you don't feel like you need to be spending your time doing those, there's more important things for you to be spending your time on, definitely pass those off. But as a rule of thumb, I just always feel like it's a really good idea to know how to do things in your business. Then you can create the system and pass it off to an employee. Okay, that should wrap up video number 2. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about sourcing product, which is one of my favorite things. I hope this video was helpful, and if you have any questions, leave those below and I'll be sure to answer those. Thanks for following along.